Nemo Radio is on the air.
A, B, C. A, always, B, C, closing. Always be closing. Always be closing.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Put that coffee down. Coffee's for closers only. Come after me! I'm a man! I'm 40!
Hey, it's John Nemo, and I'm laughing because I just got off the phone with my wife, Sarah. I love this lady. I just had a very contentious call with a client for my business, and I was kind of replaying everything with Sarah, and what was so funny was Sarah agreed with me. Not that we don't agree on things, but what I love about my wife, as she said on the phone, she goes, "Oh, believe me, John, if you were in the wrong, I would tell you." Like, what a great marriage. What a great husband and wife. Don't you love that with your spouse, where your spouse knows you so well, it could just tell you straight, like, if you goofed up or were an idiot. And I love my wife. She's just like, "Oh, believe me, I would tell you if you acted like an idiot. I would have no problem letting you know that was a moronic behavior." She's like, "In this case, it actually, based on what you're telling me, you kind of are justified, or you feel right to, feel the way you're feeling and everything." I'm like, all right, I didn't act like a doofus, right? Score one for today. So thank you, Sarah, for the Straight Talk Express. I love that lady. She can always tell me that, but it is important. It is important in your business, and in your life, to have a sounding board, to have somebody you can trust who will tell you, especially if you own a company, you have a lot of employees, whatever it is, which isn't necessarily my situation, but just in general, I think that's really valuable to have people in your circle. Friends, my business coach is like that too, John Morgan, where he'll tell me, like, he's not afraid to be like, "Yeah, I love you and everything, but I think what you did there was the wrong move," or I can see why the client would be mad or whatever. And anyway, that's just a little side thought I wanted to share as I start this podcast, which is to really have people who will tell you the truth and have people who can be trusted friends, mentors, confidants. That's really how you improve. And the other big thing too is, for me at least, being such an emotional person, it's a great asset, and it also can be a great liability. It can be a great asset in the sales process, the service process, the customer delivery process, the marketing process, where emotion, passion, enthusiasm, right? I can also be a real hothead and get angry. Right? So, like, that can be a negative, obviously, in business too, if you lose your cool. And I mean, I've had plenty of times like that in my career where, I've blown my top and, had punishment. And I remember one time, this is early in my career when I was working for a corporate employer, somebody was baiting me on email. And it was a group email with the executive team copied in, and I was the PR director at the time. And I was really on this whole thing about, we got to get on this new platform, Facebook, this other new platform, Twitter. This is the future, guys, press releases, whatever. Like, we've got to really get in on social media. This is going to be the wave of the future, right? And this was 2008, 2009-ish. By the way, U.S. economic recession. So huge recession. Jobs are impossible to find. You're lucky to have a paycheck. And I get baited into this stupid email argument with somebody who was kind of the old guard at my employer, who was like, "Nope, we're going to need to have a lawyer review and approve every tweet. We can't respond to people on Facebook. That's a liability. Like, that's never going to be a customer service vehicle where you're going to talk to people on these social platforms. You're just going to have to do phone calls," and probably this person probably said faxes and emails. And anyway, I had a rivalry going with this person because I had come in I didn't replace this person, but it's so interesting now looking back at the political dynamics of things, where I came in, and this is a great lesson for anyone listening. Performance will never save you. That was one of the key takeaways I learned from a book called Power. I think the guy's name is Jeffrey Pfeffer, like Pfeffer. He's like a Stanford professor. Wrote a great book on workplace dynamics called Power, Why Some People Have it and Others Don't. And one of the lessons I learned the hard way, and this all ties into my hot-headed emotional side, was at the time, 2008, right? Social media is just getting rolling, and I'm all in on it. I'm the PR guy. I had gotten us national TV coverage and had all this success. I had just gotten a $10,000 raise. Like, I was blowing up at this company, doing great stuff. But I did this cardinal sin where I got emotional. This person wrote this email, and again, we were kind of rivals. This person was much more old school, old guard, had been there for 20 years. I was the new guy, had been there like a year and a half, maybe a year. and I had all this success, and they baited me on this email. So, of course, in true Nemo hothead fashion, I hit reply all, doofus, right? With the executive leadership team copied in. And I'll never forget this. I start the email with, let's call a spade a spade. And it all went downhill from there. And I didn't curse in the email. I didn't swear. But this is also another lesson for this podcast. And this is also why it's so dangerous to try to communicate with people only in writing, email, or text, because you can't read tone of voice, and you just, in your head, you assign the emotion to people. Like, texting and emailing can get you in a lot of trouble, depending on the word choice, and if people don't see, like, the wink or the nod or the smile behind it or the sarcasm, like, that's a whole thing, too. But anyway, I wrote back an angry email. I'm like, let's just call a spade a spade. You and I have a rivalry. Like, you don't want to move forward. You want to keep us in the dark ages. I don't think I said it exactly this way, but it was like, basically like, why are you trying to hold us back? Social media is the future. I don't know if you're jealous of me or what your problem is, but like, this is where we need to go. I think it's ridiculous that, come on, blah, blah, blah. And anyway, I wrote that email on a Friday afternoon. I got fired Monday morning from the highest paying job I had ever had. At the height of the U.S. economic recession, when everybody was broke, there was an economic global depression. There was no money. All the banks had imploded. Remember the government bailout, 2008, 2009. I got fired. My wife wasn't working. We had 3 babies at home, 3 boys under the age of 10. I came home. I slumped down on my kitchen floor and started bawling. And like, over an angry email, right? I got fired. And what it really came down to in that moment was the big boss, the politics of it were, the old guard kind of came to her and said, get rid of this hothead. Like, he's an idiot. He can't talk to so-and-so that way. Like, no way. Get rid of him. And my performance did not save me. Even though I had literally just gotten us on NBC and Fox News and like the NBC, like Dateline NBC, like Fox News, like for a PR person, that's nirvana. National TV coverage. Are you kidding? Right? Like, I had won PR awards, by the way. Like, I had won awards, campaign awards, and national accolades and honors. I got a $10,000 raise. Got fired. Because of the ability to handle people. This is another great Dale Carnegie line. Your ability to handle people is what makes you rich, right? And I didn't handle that well. I got put to the poorhouse quick. And there's a good ending to that story. So thankfully, I got over my crying, right? And I was looking at the time, didn't have any money. Like, we had credit card debt, like, mortgage, whatever. And it was like, within a week, I had 2 new job offers. Only because of, this is the ironic part of the story, was I had started using social media for jobs. So I was able to find 2 different employers that were like, whoa, cool, you're already all in on these new trends. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn at the time. I had like a video resume on LinkedIn in 2008. Nobody had a video resume, but I found a hack with Google Docs, and I just knocked people's socks off with the few jobs that were open by being like, hey, I'm proactive. I want to use social media. I want to start this thing called a podcast. So thankfully, the great happy ending of the story was got fired on Monday, angry email on Friday, got fired on Monday, and started job hunting Monday afternoon after I cried. Thursday, I had an interview on Thursday with a local PR agency, accepted a job. It was a $20,000 pay cut. So I was going to take a $20,000 pay cut, terrible, not really good benefits, but I was desperate. I'm like, to get any job, to put food on the table in the height of a recession, yes, I'm signing up. Like, before you change your mind, yes, I'll take it. So I accepted that job on a Thursday morning, went home, still had like my shirt and tie on from the interview where I, closed them and accepted the job. Got a call from another employer or a potential employer that said, hey, we want to bring you in for an interview. And I said, well, I literally just accepted a job and I'm supposed to start tomorrow, Friday. So unless I'm like number 1 on your list, it's probably not worth talking. And the person on the other end said, actually, you were the first candidate they wanted me to call. You're number 1 on the list. I said, okay, can I come in right now and talk to you? And they're like, yep. So I went in that day. I had a lot of good leverage because I said, I already accepted another job. I was supposed to start tomorrow. And they're like, well, we really want you. Da-da-da-da-da. I did my thing in the interview, accepted a job with them. And this job I accepted actually came with a $25,000 raise. So to recap, angry email Friday, fired Monday, new job Thursday, Turned that job down, new job Friday with a $25,000 raise and like gold-plated amazing benefits because it was the labor union. God bless the Minnesota nurses. And we had a heck of a run there. And that was my last job before I went in on my own. And all of that to say, man, your ability to handle people is interesting. And the whole thing I started with Sarah with this call was like, again, it's so interesting because when I started an agency, and when you're in any kind of service-based business, where you're doing done-for-you marketing, whatever, or just any kind of agency, customer service is key, correct? And none of us like when we have a problem with a vendor or a provider or a company or a service, none of us like bad customer service. So I try to pride myself with our clients, especially with our done-for-you, services. I'll really try to go above and beyond for customer service. And so in this case, I got a text from an upset client. Anyway, did a phone call. And what's interesting, the dynamic here is that you've got to be really clear and comfortable and confident in your business model and your service model. Because what the gist of the argument, so to speak, was the client basically saying, I want you to do things the way my previous vendors did. Okay, without going into all the details, it was, I want you to do things this way, and this way, but you're doing them that way, and that way. I don't like that. It's not comfortable. It's not what I am used to. I'm not liking this at all. And so it went back and forth, and there were other things we got into, and it was just like, well, at the end of the day, you've got, the old me, right? When I was first starting a service business was the client is always right. The customer is always right. I'll do anything. But what I found quickly was if you let your clients and customers run you, A, you get very unhappy, and B, it can really derail your business model and your service model, and C, it can really ruin your morale. Like one difficult client, one bad apple will spoil the whole bunch with a service-based company because your team members, when your team members are like, oh God, I have a call with so-and-so, like they're dreading talking to clients, that's a bad sign, right? And you are, like what I found too is you'll lose your talent. People will not want to keep working for you if you just, I don't care, the person's paying this much money, deal with it. You do that with your team, you won't have your team very long. They'll be like, you might like the paycheck, but I got to deal with the person, right? So what's been really empowering and interesting for me is, and it was terrifying at first, it's gotten easier, but it's firing clients. Firing people that have signed up to give you tons of money, right? It's terrifying, especially if you have kind of that scarcity mindset. And this was something my business coach worked with me really, really hard on, especially early when I started my agency and I didn't have a lot of revenue and a lot of clients and I was kind of backward and underwater and in debt. And, he was always good about saying, like, you've got to fire bad clients, like fire them. Like one bad client will drag your whole agency down. And I've learned that the hard way, right? I've had a few clients over the years that we held on to too long that were just nightmares, right? Again, it's because we're dealing with other human beings. And in this case, with this client, it was just a case of really the other great thing is with mindset work is, yes, I got emotional on the call and I got a little hothead. Hothead Nemo came out, but, I tried really hard to do my Dale Carnegie, which I love that book, How to Win Friends, Influence People. And I started with, validating, like, I hear you're really frustrated. I hear you're upset. I can totally understand that. I can empathize with that. That's why I called you within 5 minutes of getting your text. Like, I want to give you great service. I want to tell you with issue A, B, and C, our team is actually going outside the scope of the contract and doing X, Y, and Z manually. By the way, that was an issue that was the client's fault, not mine. And we were still trying to help the client fix it, right? The client was like, well, this is stressing me out, this piece of it. Again, not anything we were responsible for. We just were trying to help and go above and beyond and do things manually. And I was like, we'll eat, you know what I mean? We want to give you a good experience. And so we kept going along this way, and then nothing was really worked. Like, the client wasn't happy. And so I kept doing the Carnegie and like, well, what would make you feel better? What would make you feel less frustrated? What would you like to see? And basically what I got back was, in a nutshell, I want you to change your delivery model. I want you to change your service. And I'm like, no, we don't. I'm not going to that's like saying, I used to go to this restaurant and they cooked my hamburger a certain way. You cook your hamburgers totally different, but I want you to change your whole kitchen, change your recipes, change your ingredients because I like the way that they prepared my meal. And it's like, no, we're a different restaurant. Like, we can't change our whole system because you don't like it. And it was basically because, the client saying my previous vendor did things this way, and this way, and I like that. You're not doing it that way. And I'm like, well, I was upfront about that. We don't do it that way. There's these pieces that are different. But yet you're here for a reason because your previous vendor obviously didn't get you the results you wanted, and then the other thing was, well, you cost more and this and that. And so it got into a bunch of back and forth, right? And long story short, and this goes back to me talking about with Sarah, like, we are in my mind and validating it, what we're doing the right things. We're doing what we said we would do. We're not, doing anything deceptive or misleading or bad. We're going above and beyond. And I basically said to the client, like, hey, we probably need to just part ways. Like, I don't want to go through several more months of this fighting tooth and nail. And when I was looking at our staff time, this is where you'll really see it, because I have my team members track by client name how many hours they spend on each project. And this client was like highlighted in yellow by my director of strategy and operations, like, dude, like, what happened this week? And it was like quadruple the amount of hours for this one client as opposed to the other 10 or 20 or whatever it was of client. And I was like, oh, so like, you'll see where bad clients, it's not just the emotional chaos, right? And you'll hear people say, like, no amount of money is worth, going through that and having to be upset and be bothered and whatever and stressed out. Like, that's true. But even just the dollars and cents, you'll look at bad clients and how much time it takes and how much extra work, and like, nothing will be good enough and nothing will please them. And no matter what you do, it's not going to work. And so it's hard. It's still hard to fire clients when you have all that other money on the hook and you have a contract and you're due to collect that. But also, it's just not worth it. You know what I mean? And the other thing is that abundance mindset that my business coach taught me of, like, you'll replace that, the emotional pain and energy and stress that you'll free up not having to deal with that negative client, you can now put into sales and marketing, right? And go get great clients. And it's true. Every time I've done that, it's true. Every time I've fired a client, a new one has popped right in and been even bigger and better than ever. And it's really interesting because there is that scarcity thing of money versus misery, right? And a lot of us, I used to feel that way with certain day jobs. Like, I had a dream last night that I was back working a day job I didn't enjoy, back when I was a journalist and doing kind of just, grunt work at a journalism employer, which I won't name because it's not their fault. It just wasn't a good fit for me as a job. And I remember in the dream being like, oh God, I'm trapped. Oh wait, I can go start my own business. This will be great. I actually in real life have a business. I don't have to work for this journalism company anymore. So it's just interesting, like, money and misery, and really understanding that, like, you've got to have confidence in yourself and in what you're doing. I think that was the big takeaway for me after the call with the client was, older, me, like younger me would have really questioned myself. Maybe we're totally off base. Maybe our delivery model stinks. Maybe this person's right. And maybe we're doing such and such wrong. But when I looked at it, I'm like, every other client is happy. No other client is texting and calling me on a holiday weekend to complain. No other client there's no other red flags. Like, and by the way, we're getting great results for these other clients. They're getting 5-figure, 6-figure sales. So it's like, whatever we're doing for all these other people is working, and just learning over time. And I think that's part of it too, is just, you have to go through the time and the experience. You learn over time, like, this person's a good fit, they're not. And that's where you really, kind of the last part I would say is, I really try hard to vet people in the sales process. And there's a real strength to that. There's a real strength and a real authority to your company and to your brand if you aren't just willing to work with anyone. If you say as an agency, a marketing agency, whatever, like, well, we're not just gonna, like, and some people think it's a sales tactic, but it's not. Like, they'll say, well, that's just a tactic. Because I'll say this on a sales call, I'll say, well, we're pretty picky about who we work with and who we take on as a client. We want to make sure it's a good fit and get you the results. Like, so why would you be a great client for us? Like, why would we love to work with you? And that works awesome on sales calls for a couple reasons. One is it flips the power back to me. Instead of the client being there across the Zoom or across the phone being like, well, I want this, this, and this, and if I'm going to work with you, you better do this, this, and this. I flip the power back into my chair and go, well, why would I even want to work with you? Like, what makes you so special, right? And I love that angle because that then flips the prospect around and they have to sell themselves to you. they have to say, well, why wouldn't you want to work with me? I'm diligent. I'm a hard worker. I want results. I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to trust your process. You're the best at this. That's what you look for, right? Or sometimes you get the red flag answers. And then what I'll say to them, if they question me about why did you say that, I'll say, because I don't want to engage with a client who doesn't trust us, who micromanages, who, wants to be, running everything when you're hiring us for a service. And I use the analogy. I say, I don't go to my tax person or my bookkeeper and say, well, I want to look at all the reports and question every decision you made. And I want to question every tax strategy. And I want you to provide court case documentation. No, you're the tax person. You're the guru. Save me money. Here we go. Right? I'm like, that's the level of trust I want with our clients is you're the guru at getting leads on LinkedIn. Go do your thing. Right? And I want to approve the content, whatever. Sure. And so it's just interesting because that does help. And you get through a lot of people's core objections that way. But even then, sometimes people come through and sometimes a client comes through and you're like, well, this will be great. This sounds perfect. And then it just isn't working, right? And the biggest lesson I've learned is the sooner you cut that off, the better. And, I even said in this client, I was just like, this is kind of a come to Jesus moment. And I tried to recover my Dale Carnegie side and go, listen, I don't want to force you through a contract that you signed that's going to make you miserable and frustrated and upset and angry. I don't want to drag you kicking and screaming through this because I have the power in this particular case with a signed contract that I can enforce and be like, you agreed to pay this. There's no refund, blah, blah, blah. And it was like, I don't want to do that. You know what I mean? That's just not good for you. It's not good for us. And it was just interesting because you really have to understand how to handle people in those moments. And at the end of the day, logic and facts and performance will not save you. It's still your ability to handle people. You have to remember, when people get emotional, it's dangerous, right? And that's where you can get fired or you can fire a client. But I think, long story short, just give yourself grace, give yourself permission to keep working at it and keep perfecting it. Certainly read the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. That has helped me a ton. I've come a long way from the angry email days. But at the end of the day, it still comes down to handling people. I don't care how good your tools are. I don't care how good your performance is, your testimonials or track record. If you can't handle people, you won't have a business. Customer service, sales, marketing, client services. I now know why in 1936, when Dale Carnegie wrote that book, he was interviewing the titans of the, of industry at the time. And I think it was Andrew Carnegie or one of the steel, because he wrote the book in the 30s, 20s and 30s era. So steel mills and factories were big. And he interviewed the guy who ran all the big steel mills on the East Coast. And he said, what's your number one thing? And the guy goes, I will pay more. He's like, what's the most critical part of your business? Who's the one employee you can't live without? And I think it was Andrew Carnegie. He's like, I will pay more for someone who can't handle people than any other thing in the world. If you can handle people, I want you. I can teach you the business skills. I can teach you spreadsheets. I can teach you steel manufacturing techniques, but I can't teach you the ability to handle people necessarily. Or if you just naturally have that, and man, is that true, even in the digital age. So there you go, rant complete. I'm glad, I got validated in my phone call with Sarah. And anyway, I hope you find this helpful as I kind of just let this all out. And there's so many good lessons in it, chief among them, how you handle people and having confidence in your service, your business, your delivery, having the confidence to say, this isn't a good fit, we should part ways, which is very powerful. And it says a lot to your team too. Remember that. Your team will really respect you if you're in the driver's seat and say, I don't want to put you through that either. As much as we all would love the money, let's move on. There's more clients. And I think that too, the other thing with your branding and marketing, look to attract the right type of clients. And that's a whole other podcast. We can do another time. But anyway, thanks for listening. Hope you found this helpful, and we'll see you soon on another episode.